Okay, being honest, I probably overdid it with the blue, didn't I? And before you ask, yes, the spots do go all the way down to about here, because I'm not putting that much makeup on, guys. Anyways, I've made no bones on this channel about who my favorite character is in all of Star Trek. Not you. No, my favorite character is Jadzia Dax on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. She's strong, she's fierce, she's incredibly intelligent, and she does it all while being damn sexy. Believe me, I love knowing that she knows that we all know that the spots go all the way down. But I adore that Jadzia Dax managed to be written as a strong-willed, smart character who nevertheless was distinctly feminine. She'll wear a hot dress while also kicking her ass, then go give a speech at the Vulcan Science Academy.
How about next time we switch roles? That way I can rescue you.
Not only that though, but considering how I've talked multiple times about how Jadzia, and especially the entire Trill species, have been used as a metaphor, intentionally or not, for transgender folks in Star Trek, you can easily see why she speaks so much to me. I have spent so many videos on this channel discussing the connection I felt between my feelings of gender at a young age and feeling represented by Jadzia on the show, seeing a character who I wished I could be and showed me and helped me explore some of the mixed gender identity feelings that I felt.
It makes things any easier. Think of me as a man. I've been one several times.
Yet, because Jadzia is so beloved by not only me but a ton of the DS9 fandom, we often overlook another brilliant character in Star Trek, Ezri Dax. And having recently done a complete rewatch of Deep Space Nine, I found myself struck by how quickly my love of Ezri reignited after having mostly forgotten her for years and years now. And one of the major reasons why is because she reminds me so heavily of my own experience learning what it was like to go through transition as a transgender person.
I'm not usually this emotional. It must be the Emily in me.
That was an experience when I was younger when I fell in love with Jadzia Dax that I didn't have yet because I wasn't out as a trans person. But Ezri, now that I'm older, is someone who I much more identify with. Ezri is a character who is all about struggling with identity, about trying to figure out who you are when your internalized sense of self suddenly makes no sense, especially when you live in a world where everyone around you seems to take for granted a sense of self that you constantly struggle with. That's something I think all of us identify with, trans or not. But for trans people specifically, Ezri's struggle with identity reminds me so much of my own struggles with gender and self-realization. So let's dive into why Ezri Dax is absolutely amazing and why she speaks to me as a transgender person, but also why her struggles with identity can speak to all of us. Oh dear God, Jadzia, I'm sorry. Were you hiding behind the You know what? It's fine. I'm just talking about Ezri for one video, okay? It's fine. It's just one video. Please don't eat my soul. Stop staring at me like that. I'm very sorry. I'm just gonna put it back, guys. I'm sorry. Don't eat my soul. Jadzia Dax's unceremonious death at the end of Season 6 of Deep Space Nine, which was allegedly caused by actress Terry Farrell leaving the show after being objectified and harassed by Star Trek executive producer Rick Berman. Check out this video for more on that disgusting outside the realm of this video events on the show. Ezri was a young Starfleet officer who, when Jadzia's symbiote Dax, the alien slug that allows memories to be passed between different hosts, is about to die on its trip back to Trill, Ezri bravely decides to become the new Dax host in order to save the symbiote's life and memories, considering she's the only Trill on the ship that can take the symbiote. Unlike Jadzia, who came into the show with unrivaled confidence due to years of training to be given a symbiote, Ezri was unprepared to get Dax. She's also much younger than pretty much anyone on the show and pretty much any main character in Star Trek. She's just about to graduate and become a full-fledged counselor, beginning her career for the first time. So right at the moment in her life when she's supposed to be figuring out who she is on her own terms to have a life that just begins for her, she's suddenly asked to take on the mantle of many other identities as well. She doesn't even know herself as Ezri and is now asked to figure out this brand new element of her body on top of that, and her own mind, as well as years of memories from other people.
I lay down on that operating table one person, and I woke up a completely different person. Well, I should say 8 different people. I was not prepared for this at all.
I understand this weirdly so hard. For pretty much all of us, trans or not, our youth is the time we are meant to figure out who we are, to find ourselves, do that walkabout journey, or, go through puberty. One of those 2 things. I'm not sure which one it's supposed to be. It's why we spend so much of our time as kids trying out new things, exploring new ideas and identities and thoughts to figure out what resonates with us. We all have our emo phase, for example, that kind of stuff. And yet, as a trans person, there is an extra layer, an extra level of uncertainty during this time. As a young transgender kid who doesn't have the words yet to explain what they're feeling inside, it feels strange to know that you're going through all this turmoil about how you exist in the world and in your gender, and you look at everyone else around you and feel like they're being normal, that they just take for granted feeling who they are in their bodies. They all get to explore their interests from a sense of certainty within themselves, for a certainty in like, okay, at least I'm a guy, or at least I'm a girl, and can move from there, that baseline. But for a trans person, nothing feels certain at a young age. And you have a world, a society, an entire country telling you that you should know right from your birth that your gender matches who you are. I remember going to school every day and feeling horrible, honestly. I would look at my female classmates and I would feel nothing but jealousy. I would look at them as I was going through puberty and see myself, my voice getting deeper and, having to wear ties and button-ups for big events or things like that. And I just looked at my friends and I just wish I could wear the clothes that they got to wear every single day, to be seen in the way that they were seen by the world. And to be honest, I hated myself for that. To feel jealous of someone just for being themselves, I don't like feeling jealousy at all, but for being jealous of someone just for their existence, that sucks. It really makes you feel really awful and skeevy, but I couldn't get rid of that feeling. This child who got to look at all of his female classmates go through the very experience that I wanted to have so badly, because I wanted to be understanding and kind and not weird and jealous of other kids for something that I knew I shouldn't be jealous of them for. I shouldn't be jealous of girls for being girls. I should just be a guy, right? And so I felt awful and confused and just skeevy. And Ezri feels this too in the show. Jealousy that she didn't get the time to explore her own identity before being thrust into a body situation that she never asked to have. Just like I never asked to have to question my gender. She doesn't get the convenience of figuring herself out like everyone else does. She is being thrust into this transitory phase right at the moment when she should finally be settling down into who she is, at least for this phase of her life. Right when she should be passing her counselor exams and becoming a professional, she has to stop everything in her life to figure out the basics of who she is.
Kiln steak. Rare. No, Tobin was a vegetarian.
I personally came out as transgender right when I graduated college in 2014. And I mean right when I graduated college. And this was the moment in my life where I was supposed to be entering the world as a professional to figure out what I wanted my path in life to be. But now, at that time, I had to stop all of that. Instead of moving to Los Angeles to pursue a career in film, I stayed in my small college town of Ithaca, New York because I wanted to start transitioning. And it was like entering puberty all over again. Beginning hormones, whew, that's a time. It's a time. I had to figure out what it meant to be Jessie now instead of James. Just as Ezri needed to figure out what it meant to be Ezri Dax instead of just Ezri. Right at the moments when we should be exploring our next step in life, we both had to go all the way back to the beginning and rediscover ourselves. For me, it meant taking hormones while also trying to start a job and being on my own and away from my family for the longest time and trying to have some semblance of personal identity within myself. But the most important thing that happens to Ezri is perhaps the reason why I love Star Trek most, because, you see, despite her own misgivings about her body and identity, Sisko instantly sees her and accepts her for who she is, not who he wants her to be. Sisko is the person that every transgender person needs in their life, someone who accepts them and affirms them, but also affirms their uncertainty.
Sir, I'm still in training.
Oh, come on, Dax, what are you gonna learn in the next few months that you haven't already learned in the last 300 years?
Oh, how to keep from breaking into tears for no reason, how to resist the urge to stand on my head, things like that.
Why are you standing on your head, by the way?
Sisko instantly starts calling Ezri Old Man, his nickname for both Jadzia and Curzon before, and allowing Ezri to feel a sense of stability, something to latch onto as definitively true about herself. It's deeply beautiful that despite her new body, Cisco still sees Dax inside of her. Yet he also acknowledges that she is someone new, that there are elements of Dax, but she is also Ezri.
I'm not the old man. I'm not Curzon or Jadzia.
No, you're Ezri. Ezri Dax.
He acknowledges who she was and who she is, allowing Dax that sense of stability, but a permission, more importantly, to explore herself that she didn't have before because she now has that base sense of identity that a Cisco affirms in her. She finally learns something about herself that feels true and feels right, and in that way she is able to orient herself around it. It's why she stays at Deep Space Nine, just as I stayed in my college town of Ithaca, in order to root herself, as I did myself, in the familiar in order to explore the less familiar about yourself. We put ourselves in situations around us that feel safe and comfortable in order to, be able to explore the parts of ourselves inside that are strange and new and different.
It's funny. Before yesterday, I'd never set foot on this station, but it's as familiar to me as the back of my hand.
And sadly, not every trans person gets the same experience that I had. A lot of trans people don't have that safe, affirming world around them, so they have to deal with an uncertain world while dealing with their own uncertainty inside, and that's really, really difficult and hard for anyone to go through. But moving beyond that though, when a trans person transitions, we often feel like we need to change everything about ourselves in order to fit our new desired identity. When I came out as a trans woman, I even asked my therapist at the time, am I still allowed to like video games or comics or Star Trek? Those all seemed like boy things to me, which they're not, but, society gender stuff. So did I have to give up those things that I loved in order to feel comfortable in my identity as a girl? And like I said, this is patently untrue, but when you're trying to rediscover how to exist in a world in a new way, in a new body, in a new gender situations, these are the questions you ask yourself. You question everything about who you were. And I was lucky to have a Cisco in my life. My best friend at the time, the first person I came out to, he saw me for me. He knew me before my transition, knew that I was this big nerd who loved Star Trek and video games and all that nerd crap. He did as well. And he made me feel okay with knowing that I could explore and should explore my identity. He encouraged me to try on dresses, to come out at work, to speak up when I wanted to have certain pronouns used for me, and never made me feel bad when I felt uncomfortable and awkward in these new clothes and identities. Even though it was something that I wanted my entire life, I still felt uncomfortable wearing a dress for the first time because it was new, it was different, it was strange, even though it was something I had dreamed about. Yet, he never let me forget that I was a big nerd. He often played video games with me and watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He allowed me to root myself in something that I knew to be true about me, allowing me to explore other parts of myself. He pushed me when I needed to be pushed and affirmed me when I didn't. Cisco does the same for Dax. In the episode Aftermath, Ezri questions if she has the counseling skills necessary to help Garrick overcome his PTSD. At first, Cisco pushes Ezri, showing his confidence in her. He knows that she's a good counselor because that's a part of Ezri, that's a part of who she was before, and he encourages her to push herself.
Oh, come on, old man, you can do this.
All right, I'll try. I just wish I had as much confidence in me as you do.
But when Ezri fails her first attempt to help Garrick, Garrick destroys her and her confidence.
I mean, look at you. You're pathetic. A confused child trying to live up to a legacy left by her predecessors. You're not worthy of the name Dax. I knew Jadzia. She was vital, alive. She owned herself, and you don't even know who you are. How dare you presume to help me?
And Ezri loses all sense of self, all sense of identity, all sense in believing in herself.
I'm resigning from Starfleet
Why?
because I can't do my job. Garrick was right. How can I help other people when I can't even help myself?
But Cisco does not let her give up. He pushes her even further because he knows who she is, even if she doesn't. It's so easy for a transgender person to lose confidence in their new explorations of identity, or even their sense of self, of who they are, of who we are, because it's so new to us. We have an entire society of people telling us that, you can't change your gender, you can't be this thing that you know you are inside. Like Ezri had Garrick telling her that she wasn't a good counselor. I had so many people telling me that I wasn't a girl. So to have a friend tell me, no, this is who you are. Don't doubt yourself or I'll hit you upside the head until you realize the amazing person that you are. That is so insanely helpful and so insanely necessary for many trans people.
Now, I know this is confusing for you right now, but in time, you'll see it's a wonderful gift.
It's a gift I don't deserve.
That's the way you feel. Then go back to Trill. Talk to the Symbiosis Commission. Maybe you could convince them to take the symbiont out of you.
I wish they could, but removing the symbiont would kill me. You know that.
Well, if you're leaving Starfleet, you'll have to find something to do. Let's see. Maybe you could become one of the people who take care of the symbiont pools. It's quiet in those caves. No one around. No one expecting great things of you. You could spend the rest of your life underground, in the dark, stirring mud.
Sadly, many transgender people don't have that person in their life or even that situation to even ask for that type of person or that kind of help. I was lucky to have my Cisco, as Ezri was. A lot of transgender people often have many different, less certain and supportive reactions from their friends and family, just as Ezri, by the way, does on Deep Space Nine, that cause us to question our sense of self even more. I spoke about how Garrick's denial of Ezri's ability as a counselor is similar to how many in society will tell transgender people that they aren't their real gender. His attacks are vicious and personal, and yet hit a very real uncertainty that all trans people like Ezri felt. That we are faking, that we aren't really the identity that we want to be, that we are just pretending, that we're just putting on a facade. But Garrick is patently wrong in this scene, but he hits on a real emotion and uncertainty for Ezri. And unlike Ezri, many transgender people have a wave of people, an entire society built around telling them that they are wrong. If you just want a quick example of that, look in pretty much any of the comment sections of my videos, especially around heated topics, and you'll find many people saying like, you're just a dude, you're just a boy. Oh, well look at that, like, that chiseled jaw you got going on. Oh, your voice is so deep. It's all these like things trying to tell me that I am a boy, no matter what I present as, what I identify as, what I feel inside, deep in my soul. Imagine having an entire society of Garricks telling you you are silly, stupid, wrong, or even dangerous for being who you want to be. Sometimes they're even violent about it, emotionally or physically. That's what many transgender people confront when they start transitioning at their most uncertain phase, when they're most vulnerable. I used to work at Starbucks right after I graduated college, and that's the job that I had when I started coming out as a woman. And I had been working there for several months and had started to grow a nominal confidence in my identity as a woman, to be asked to be seen as a woman from others, and to just believe in myself as a woman. And that confidence and that externalizing of that fact made other trans people want to come to the Starbucks and just hang out and talk to me and be near me just because they hadn't been near any other trans people before. I remember one specific trans woman who had just tentatively came out that she was so nervous to talk about her trans identity that she would just whisper to me in the corner every once in a while whenever I was over there wiping down the counters. That she would just ask me advice or hang out after work just a little bit just so she could have a little bit of a moment to express herself as a trans woman. And she started feeling confident enough that she started to wear a dress every once in a while to the store. But she was still so nervous to show any part of herself to the world because she was afraid for her job, and she felt safe there in the Starbucks. But our Starbucks was part of a larger hotel building, and so to use the bathroom, you had to go inside the hotel. Now, for me, that wasn't that much of an issue at that time. I had grown enough confidence in myself that I didn't care that much. But I remember knowing one night that she was going to be visiting that evening, my friend, and I went to the bathroom, the women's bathroom, and came out, and the janitor was standing there. And he started yelling at me, screaming at me that I was gross and disgusting and wrong and awful for going into the women's bathroom. I don't even think he meant it as like a trans thing. He just thought I was a boy going into the women's bathroom because I didn't look all that feminine at the time. I was actually kind of being lazy that day. I was just like, I don't feel like putting on a lot of makeup or whatever. I just want to go to work. And because I didn't put in the extra work to look feminine, I looked like a boy going into the girls' bathroom to him. And so, like I said, he screamed and yelled at me. And I took it on my chin. I told his boss, but I didn't say who it was specifically. I wasn't there to get anyone fired. I just said maybe you should do some sensitivity training. But I also had to make sure that my friend couldn't go to the bathroom that night because that janitor was working that entire evening. I knew that if she had experienced that, she would never have come back. But I know today that because she was able to build up that confidence, she is one of the leaders of the trans community in that area now today. But she would never have had that confidence, or would have at least taken her much longer if she had been confronted that way at her most vulnerable time. This is the most overt and obvious stigma that many trans people face that I think most people understand. But Deep Space Nine and Ezri Dax also show us more subtle jabs at identity that trans people face, even from people who mean to be kind to their transgender friends. First and most obviously, a lot of the time when trans people come out and transition and go back and meet some of their friends who knew them before they transitioned, it is uncomfortable for everyone involved because they don't know how to interact with each other. They don't know how to address each other. They don't know how to be around someone who has changed gender. And Ezri goes through much the same thing. When she comes back to Deep Space Nine, many of her old friends who knew her as Jadzia Dax are slightly uncomfortable around her now because she looks and seems like someone different, even though to a degree she is still kind of the same person.
It must be a little disconcerting for you, knowing that I have Jadzia's memories. No wonder you're uncomfortable.
It's a lot to get used to.
Tell me about it. Well, I'll let you get to your prayers.
Now, quite obviously, a trans person just as Ezri is not exactly the same as they used to be. I mean, obviously there has been a change, and it takes a lot of time for both people to get used to that. But usually this period of discomfiture goes away with time as both parties start to get to know each other again and figure out how to interact with each other yet again. A subtle one comes in the form of Bashir and Quark in Ezri's first episode back on the station. Bashir and Quark are attracted to Ezri, and now see her as available because she's no longer married to her former host's husband, Worf.
Are you interested? Sounds to me like you're the one who's interested, Quark. It's not every day you get a second chance with a woman. It's not the same woman. She's still Dax, isn't she? More or less. Well, it's good enough for me.
They in many ways objectify her, make her an object of their desires instead of an actual person, because this is the first time they're meeting her. They don't know her, but yet they find her incredibly, incredibly hot. Now, Quark is doing this more obviously.
Now we're close. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be close to. Remember all those late-night tango games?
Who could forget?
But Bashir, too, is clearly interested in her now that she's available and in a new body, despite having previously acknowledged that he was over being interested in Jadzia.
You came on so strong. You never really gave me a chance to get to know you.
You're right. I didn't. Well, don't worry, Jadzia. It's been a long time since I had that particular fantasy.
Bashir and Quark have been mostly single men throughout the entire show, and now because Dax, someone who they had had a deep relationship with as Jadzia, has transitioned to Ezri, this reignites their romantic desires with no real care for Ezri's feelings. And this is something that I experience in my own way. Soon after coming out, a close straight male friend of mine who had been supportive of my transition called me drunk in the middle of the night. He began to talk about how hot he found me now that his bro, his friend who loved video games and nerd stuff as much as him, was now a girl. But you see, while I'm certain he was calling to be affirming, that call was really all about him. He was attracted to me because he saw me as that geek gamer girl that he always wanted to date. A chance to already have a pre-established deep relationship with someone, but now could actually have acceptable sexual feelings for as well because, you know, he was straight and I was seen as a girl now. It was all about him and what I could be to him, not about what I could be to myself. He just saw me as an attractive hot gamer girl now, someone that he didn't have to work to do the extra effort to getting to know, because he had known me as a boy, right? He didn't need to get to know me anymore, he just could say like, yeah, you're hot, and actually having to worry about questions of his own sexuality. It even got so far as to when I went and visited him one night, he let me stay in his spare bedroom that he had. But before I, got into bed and went to bed that evening, he came into the room, we talked for a minute, and when he left, he kissed me. He did that without my permission, and then he left. Now, this is going to be difficult to explain because I want to set aside the darker overtones of that, because emotionally for me, at that moment, I was deeply conflicted as well. I mean, yes, he did kiss me without permission, yes, I didn't ask for that, but I was conflicted because, you see, he was affirming me as a woman in that moment. You have no idea how exciting it was to, so early in a transition, meet a guy who found me attractive, that was interested in me as a girl. I had never had that before, so it was a chance to explore being an object of desire as a girl. And as someone who had been raised as a boy, that made sense to me. I had been taught as a young boy to see women as objects. So to be a girl that a guy wanted was what I wanted, right? I wanted to be an object of desire for a guy, right? That's what being a girl is? That's what I thought when I was, at that stage of my transition. I wasn't confident in myself and didn't know that I could be anything other than what I saw women as when I was taught that as a boy. I knew I was a girl, but I didn't necessarily know what being a girl meant at that time. I didn't have a sense of my own identity as a girl yet, and so being a guy's version of a girl was something that made sense to me because that's what I'd been taught. I was still only seeing my sense of identity through the prism of someone else's desires, a desire that was enabled by society telling me that women should be objects of desire, and a lifetime of being raised to only see women from a guy's point of view. I understood it. The kiss he gave me made me feel uncomfortable, and yet I didn't know how to express that or feel about that. How was I supposed to express my discomfort? I mean, wasn't I a girl? Wasn't I supposed to want him to kiss me? I thought that that was affirmation of who I was, but it wasn't affirming me as who I was. He wasn't affirming me as Jessie. He was affirming me as an object of his own desire. And I was confused and unsure of myself because I was desired by someone else, just as Ezri was being desired by Bashir and Quark. But what I love about Ezri is she pushes back against their affections at first, because she needs to figure out who she is.
This might be the last thing you want to hear, but, you have Jadzia's eyes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything.
Don't flirt with me, Julian.
Later on, when she comes to terms with her identity and figures out who Ezri is, that is when she starts building a relationship with Bashir, because she now knows that she wants to be with Bashir, because she now knows that that's what she wants, not what Bashir wants. And it's what I had to figure out too. I now know who I'm attracted to, who I'm interested in, and that type of thing, and I just want to be friends with him. And I understand him as well, that he, at that moment in time, just felt like he wanted to be in a relationship with anybody because he felt bad about never having been in a relationship. And he saw me as an easy chance to have that. We're both now older and wiser, and we are still friends, and we still love each other very much in a non-romantic kind of way. And we both know that just because society says something doesn't mean it's what either of us want. I don't want to speak for him too much, though, but I feel like he, acknowledges that as well. And one of the other elements that Ezri is confronted with when she transitions is her family. There's a wonderful episode when Ezri goes home and shares this scene at her family's dinner table.
I'm still sorting out my pronouns.
I'm sure all joint drills go through this.
No, just me. Nothing simple for Ezri. There's times when the computer asks me to identify myself and I have to think about what to say. Or worse yet, there's days when I wake up and I don't even know if I'm a man or a woman until I pull back the covers. I also have an unfortunate tendency to ramble.
This is almost word for word the exact conversation that almost every transgender person has with their affirming family. Trans people who are lucky enough to have a family who accepts them as a trans person often still have to face a period where they are exploring themselves and their family doesn't get that or doesn't fully understand what it means to have a trans person in their family. You see, Ezri is joking at the beginning of the scene. She's sharing very real experiences that she's had of not knowing what pronouns to use or even feeling awkward in her body as a boy or a girl. But she laughs at that though. Yes, it's a hard thing that she's going through. Yes, it's a very real experience, but she's making light of it because there's a kind of joy in transition for, I presume, trills, but also for trans people. There's a joy in learning more about yourself in your new identity. Every single day, you're learning more about what makes you comfortable in yourself and how you wish to express yourself to the world. And honestly, that should be fun. It's why I encourage everyone to explore their form of gender, whether they're trans or not, and why I affirm that you exploring your gender is a fun thing to do, because it is. It's fun to maybe wear dresses or more masculine types of clothes, or wear makeup or less makeup, or just get to express yourselves in new ways through your gender. It's fun to learn more about yourself, and I adore that Ezri jokes about it here, because I felt that so much too. Half of this channel is just me making terrible trans jokes. But when she makes those jokes, her family just stares blankly because they don't get it. They want to be affirming, but the jokes make them feel awkward, and they don't honestly know if they're allowed to laugh because they don't want to make light of Ezri's situation. And also for them, Ezri transitioning is a huge deal. They feel like Ezri is not on the plan that they had always saw for her. That her mother, being this control freak that she is, doesn't want Ezri to take this new life path for herself.
You've barely spent one night in this house, and you think you can analyze our entire family? You don't know your brother anymore, Ezri. He's a fragile young man who needs to be cared for.
He is a grown man who needs his freedom. You're smothering him.
How dare you come in here and tell me how to be a mother? What do you know about raising children?
Actually, I have 4 lifetimes worth of memories about raising children.
I have worked and sacrificed for each one of you for over 30 years.
And so it's a mixture of being awkward, not knowing if they should laugh, but also it being such a big deal for them that this person is now no longer who they thought they were and now has a different life path. It's okay as a family member or friend of a trans person to mourn that their life is going to be different than you thought it was, as long as you're affirming them as a person and take joy as well at their new life path before them that is going to better match who they are. But Ezri's family don't want to make her feel bad for being a symbiote, so they don't want to laugh along with her, and they don't really get it either, so they just left her telling a joke only for herself. And so, because no one gets it and it's awkward for everybody, Ezri quiets down and apologizes even for sharing that part of her journey. She shouldn't have to apologize for being herself, for sharing joy at her learning more of who she is, but she does apologize because her very identity, who she is, the experiences that she's going through, make people uncomfortable. And that sucks. It sucks that the people you're supposed to be closest to are made uncomfortable by the very basics of who you are and your experience. Too often, transgender people apologize for being themselves when they shouldn't have to, and I adore Ezri's scene here. I love that as the rest of the episode goes on, Ezri stands up to and becomes more confident in her dealings with her family. Though she also has to deal with her brother being a murderer in that episode, which is not a normal part of the trans experience. At least, I don't think it is. I should call my brother more often. But the final example that I want to highlight is Ezri and Worf. You see, Worf used to be married to Jadzia, and right before meeting Ezri, he had finally mourned Jadzia's death. So when he is confronted with Ezri, he refuses to get to know her.
You are not Jadzia. Jadzia died and went to Sto-vo-kor. I do not know you, nor do I wish to know you.
He isn't saying Ezri is wrong or bad for being herself, at least not overtly, but he doesn't want to get to know her on her own terms. He still judges her by who she was, by Jadzia's terms, not by who she is, by Ezri's terms.
Jadzia also used humor to lift her spirits.
You didn't laugh very much at her jokes either.
You are a lot like her.
In some ways. But which one? I've been born 9 times.
This is ridiculous.
I'm a counselor. Analyzing dreams is part of my job.
Jadzia never talked about her dreams.
Well, I'm not Jadzia, am I?
I should have known. Jadzia had feelings for him as well.
Would you stop comparing me to her?
Sadly, this all too often happens with transgender folks. I had a close friend and roommate of mine before I came out who was incredibly affirming of me being transgender. He supported me, he used the right pronouns, even defended me in some situations. But he still always felt that I was somehow lesser than who I had been before. That I had somehow taken something away from him. And this became clear one night when we got into an argument over paying the rent. Something ultimately unimportant, really. It was a minor sort of issue, but we got into a little bit of a heated argument. And at the end of that argument, as he was leaving, he turned to me and said, "James would have never done this." James being the name I had before I used Jessie. To him, as Jessie, I was never as good as James. I was lesser. To him, he saw me as something not only different, but not as good. And while he never would overtly state that, these little hints of that came out all the time. And that hurt to know, because he was a good friend, but ultimately I had to accept that he was just wrong. He felt that way because he never let himself really get to know who I had been when I was pretending to be James. How being Jessie made me better because I wasn't hiding anything anymore. I was just me. I got to share more of me with the world. I got to share more of who I was, and so honestly, screw him because he never saw me for me, ever. And the chance that he had to see me for me, he refused to. He only saw me for who he wanted me to be, who I had been for him, never on my own terms. He wanted me to be someone who would hide who I was in order to make him feel better. And that ultimately is incredibly selfish. And that's a common experience for many trans folks, and really anyone in the LGBTQ community. So many trans and gay folks hear from friends and family, well, why didn't you just not come out? It would have been much easier. Yeah, it would have been much easier. For you, but not for us. You may not have seen our depression, our struggles, our self-hatred every day, but we felt it every second. And so yeah, it was easier for you because you didn't have to deal with the awkwardness of pronouns or having to learn a new name. Stuff I understand is awkward and takes time to deal with. I get it, there's a reason it's called transitions. But that pales in comparison to the pain a trans person has to face if they don't come out. And I'm glad, by the way, that O'Brien confronts Worf about this. O'Brien is a great ally, by the way. He tells Worf he needs to get to know Ezri as Ezri, not as Jadzia.
But this woman is not Jadzia, and treating her as if she were dishonors her memory.
Wrong. Treating Ezri like a stranger dishonors Jadzia's memory.
It doesn't make any sense. She is not Jadzia, yet she is. How can I honor the memory of the woman I loved when she is not really dead?
I don't have an answer for you, Worf. But let me ask you this. How do you think Jadzia would want you to treat Ezri?
There's no way to know.
Yes, there is. And the person who can tell you is the person you've been avoiding ever since she got here.
This right here is why O'Brien is the greatest man in all of Starfleet. And you know what? Worf does.
On Corrales, I allowed myself to see her instead of you.
It takes him some time. He and Ezri bone a little bit, and there's a lot of judgmental stuff going on in that whole sequence. Also, they get kidnapped by the Marine. That's a whole storyline. But ultimately, it may not have been the same or as close of a relationship as Worf had with Jadzia, but by accepting Ezri on her own terms, Worf was able to create a new, beautiful friendship.
It was an unworthy impulse.
Worf, we're not gods or prophets. We're people. We make mistakes. Friends.
And more.
And more.
He was able to form a greater friendship with Ezri than he would have if he had just shut himself out. But it was something new and different, but it wasn't worse. It was just different. He opened himself up and gave both Ezri and himself a gift of a new relationship. A different relationship, but one that was still worthwhile. Looking back, when I was a kid, Jadzia Dax was always the woman that I wanted to be. Strong, smart, sexy, and distinctly feminine in all of that. But realizing that, rewatching the show, Ezri Dax is the person who I was. Someone who was unsure of myself, anxious, and figuring myself out. But upon rewatching Deep Space Nine, one of the things that struck me most was how I saw so much of Ezri in my past self. You see, right now, I'm mostly done with my transition. I've been out for years and feel comfortable in my identity as a woman. And I've done most of the surgeries, not all, there's a few things here and there, but I've done most of the surgeries that I want to have to transition. And what I appreciated most while watching Ezri was reconnecting with those moments in my life where I was unsure of myself. But I also realized that isn't where I am anymore. Ezri is who I used to be, and it's weird to realize that I'm on the other side of that. I still have a lot to learn about myself, because who doesn't? That's what life is, that journey. But despite that, I feel confident. I feel confident in who I am. Ezri in Deep Space Nine was who I used to be, but now, I'm me. It's honestly really, really surprising to realize that all of that unsureness and self and discovery of your identity that Ezri goes through is something that I went through and am now kind of past. I'm more confident in my identity than I ever was in the entirety of the rest of my life, even back before I even transitioned. And that's really surprising. It's honestly really kind of nice to know. In the end, Ezri does find herself. She navigates all these waters to finally, by the end of Deep Space Nine, coming into her own sense of self. She still has a lot to learn and a long way to go getting from there to here, but at this point in her life, at the end of the series, the most important part is she now knows who she is. And I love, by the way, in the Deep Space Nine books that take place after the series, Ezri decides to pursue becoming a captain, a rank she eventually earns. And she only goes after that rank because she took the time to feel confidence in herself and to learn what she actually wanted in her life, now that she was Ezri Dax. To learn who she is, just as I did. So in many ways, Ezri still is who I am. And I think Ezri is more who I am than Jadzia ever was. And so for reminding me of that, I only have one thing to say to her.
Thanks, old man.
Anytime.
It also doesn't hurt that Ezri is a straight-up leftist Marxist.
The truth is, you have been willing to accept a government that you know is corrupt.
You tell him, Ezri. Now, if only we could have that conversation here in the United States. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was fun for all of you. Now I get the joy of taking off all these spots. Does anyone want to help me with this? Sorry, I'm not going to be a thirst trap. I apologize. Jadzia is just always yeah, do the spots always go down that I just want to make all the, sexy jokes, so apologies if that makes anyone uncomfortable, and if it doesn't make you uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable. So let's keep going and finish this out. Thank you so much for watching. First things first, don't forget to let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Ezri or Jadzia or anything like that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Also, I have a Patreon page. Patreon really does mean a lot to me. It really could change my life, even if you just give $5, and you get yourself cool perks like your name in the video as well. But beyond all of that, Patreon, subscribing, things like that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. I didn't start the patron. Okay, I did. But I didn't light it 'cause you all provided. So thank you to patrons. I'm gonna sing the list now and I hope you like it. Alexander Miller, Catherine Lambeth, Miranda Janelle, Ashley Allen Bokikio, Eli Bermas, Sonia Taffer, Ashlyn Solstice, Greg Gillum, Stephen Clenard, Randy Thompson, Baba Ruski, Felicia Toast, Alexander Miller, Stephen Schuhart, Kate McTeekeen, Wellington Marcus, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl Bass, James Krivda, Ish the Man, a man chooses, a slave obeys, John Cool, Dominic Noble, Buttoneer, Wu-Tan Fool, Jessica Wright, Peter Landers, Travis Ridge, John Steele, Meadow Whisperer, William Stewart, Joy A, Maggie the Goblin, Camille T, Ulysses the Pagan, Amanda Comet, Alex Owen, Jason Knott, Munir Amlani, BBD, Hannah F, John Weatherby, Hirius, Maeve Lamia, Nathan Steele, Bree Breacher, Andrew K, Sky Skinner, Sean Piper, Flynn, Tiffany Danger, Bush, Wendizzle Bizzle, Gretchen Badger, Geek Filter, Cast the Lass, Janie Packard, Ellie O'Dare, Keith Briggs, Troy Stull, Sarah Bystam, Mari Neckar, Laura Demereau, W. Randy Edie, Lysa, Polly Mina Din, Pissed and Twisted Garage, Jacob Tovar, Sarah Sweeney, Jessica Chapman, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Mara Mack, Andrew Lamoureux, Celestial Dawn, Zone 1 Librarian, Jenny Marble, Michael Hardy, Pasty, Corey, and Vale Honkanen. Newt says hi to everybody, and we love you. Mwah.